Hi there, my name is David, and today we're going to talk about ametrine. We have a parcel that we bought some years ago, and it needs to be ground clean and sawed so that we can see exactly what we have. Ametrine is a form of quartz which has two colors. It has a color yellow or orange, which is the citrine color, and a purple color, which is the amethyst color, and they occur naturally together in some places in the world, together in the same rock. As I mentioned, this rock is quartz. So today we're going to be processing, in this video we're going to be processing a smallish parcel of ametrine and getting it cleaned up. That means we're going to saw out the cracks, take out the inclusions, grind out the unnecessary parts which are not useful for faceting. And then there's a second step to this process, to look at the rough and see where the color is, and then preform that stone to make the best use of the color. Now this particular material we have is from Bolivia, which is one place in the world where the nicest color of ametrine comes from. The Anahi mine produces some really good ametrine. Now, maybe a lot of you have seen an ametrine divided right in the middle, the purple on one side and the yellow on the other. This is very beautiful, and it's a very interesting way to use the material, but it wastes a lot of material because the colors don't appear in the rock in these separate bands. Instead, it seems as if the crystal forms sort of like a radiation sign, that thing that has 3 black triangles and 3 yellow triangles. There are, in the crystal, coming up through the crystal, there are 3 rays of yellow and 3 rays of purple. And we have a piece, an unfaceted piece, maybe I can show you that later, that displays this characteristic. It's very different. Now when we're grinding on this rock, we just have what I believe is cobbed out material. Cobbing is when you take a light hammer and you grab the original crystal in your hand and you strike it with a hammer to break off the unwanted parts. The parts are too cloudy or unusable in some way. The cobbing leaves a crystal face. Here, I'll get you a piece here. Leaves this shiny crystal faces. They're sort of broken off very randomly. Of course, the cobber tries to get, you can see the 2 colors here in the stone. Person cobbing tries to do the best he can to not lose much material, but even so, it's a very rough process. Now, what I'm doing is not preforming, it's just cleaning up the rough, getting it removing all the excess. Perhaps the viewer would be interested to know that when a rough gemstone is found, until when it comes out as a faceted stone, on the average, it loses 80% of its weight. That's right, 80%, that's the worldwide average. You lose the vast majority of the stone. So think about this, when you find a precious stone, it's much more precious because a lot of that stone is wasted in the grinding and polishing process. Stone cutting is sort of a misnomer. It isn't really cut. I think in times past they used to cleave diamonds with a chisel and a hammer, and they would split them open on a cleavage plane. But Nothing like that happens with the colored stone. It's a grinding process with discs that are impregnated with diamond powder of various grits, and then a polishing process, which can be extremely fine diamond or other materials that people use to achieve a very high polish. So what I'm saying here is that precious stones are, in fact, very precious, because even when they're found, until they come out faceted, they lose the majority of their weight. I have seen gemstones that the faceter was able to recover 40% or a little more of the rough. It's still less than half, but it's a tremendous feat, and you have to have a well-shaped piece of rough that's almost like the shape you want it to be before you can achieve that kind of yield. Naturally, the more carats you can get out of your rough, the more money you make. So everyone tries to maximize the yield from their piece of rough. But with this ametrine, because we have to grind it clean and then orient it for a beautiful color orientation, there isn't a way to get very good yield. So we're going to be losing quite a bit of material, but we know that from the start, and we accepted that when we bought the parcel. And so we're going to look at the stones as they are right now, and I'm going to show you a little bit about what I'm doing with grinding and sawing. We can't leave any inclusions inside the gemstone. If you see a defect in the middle of the stone, you can't leave it there. Why is that? Because this material is relatively inexpensive. If you have something very valuable, like a sapphire, for example, and there are some cracks or inclusions in the middle, sometimes you can leave them and try to hide them with a faceting, because the value is so great that you can't lose any more carats than you have to. But with quartz, which is a much cheaper material, you can't do that. You have to get all the inclusions out, no matter what it costs you, and just accept the loss and try your best to have a beautiful and saleable stone. Talking about carats is interesting, because usually you often buy rough by the gram. And it turns out that in every gram of weight, there are 5 carats, which is kind of handy to figure out. Since the normal loss on a stone is 80%, that means if you have a 1 gram piece of rough, you're going to end up with a 1 carat gemstone. So when you're buying rough and looking at rough, that's sort of something you look at. Say, okay, I'm buying 10 grams, I'm going to get 10 carats of gems. Or if it looks really clean, it looks like nice shapes, you think, well, maybe I'll get 30% recovery. Maybe I'll get a little better than that, and therefore be able to make a little more money. Okay, so that's just an introduction of what we're doing here. I'm sitting in front of my grinding machine, which is a Cab King. Put in a little plug for this machine. It's fairly inexpensive and works really well. We know the owner, and if you want a machine like that, tell him you heard it from us, and maybe they'll give you a special deal. All right, now I'll turn the camera around and we'll look at the rough before we start. All right, here you see the parcel of rough that we're going to be working on. If I can get my fingers out of the way, it'd be better. This is the Ametrine from Bolivia, and they're pretty large sizes. I'll put a pencil in here so you can see what the sizes are. Pretty chunky pieces and pretty nice color, although some of them are a bit washed out. And now we're going to put them on the scale and see how much they weigh. All right, here I am putting some of these ametrine on the scale. This scale only goes up to 500 grams, and so we're going to have to go a little bit at a time here. Oops, I went over. Okay, we have 372.7 grams. All right, here we go again. We'll put the rest on there if we can get it all weighed. I have to move around a little bit to see where I'm putting things. I can't see past my camera here. But you get the idea. Whoop, we went over again. Okay, we've another 380.1 grams. And last but not least, we have a piece of 38.3 grams. All right, according to my imprecise calculations, we have a total of 791.1 grams of material. Now what we'll do is we'll work through this material, and then we'll see what we come out with after all the grinding is finished. Now I promised to show you some ametrine rough, and I hope you can see it well, how it's divided into two parts, the yellow and the purple. This is a really nice, chunky, clean piece that we bought some time ago. But what I wanted to show you was this three-part piece where you see the three purple triangles and the yellow part. This is how the crystal grows. It grows up in this direction until eventually you have this slice. We cut right across the crystal here, and this is how it grows. So if you want to get a piece that looks like this, you have to waste a lot of material, because it doesn't just grow in two parts, nice two parts like this. You have to go out from the center of the crystal and cut away a lot of excess material to arrive at this beautiful gem divided into two distinct parts. Therefore, ametrine is more expensive often than your regular quartz because of the amount of material wasted to arrive at a two-part stone. Now we're going to do some sawing. First of all, let me say a few words about quartz. Quartz is a silicate, and that means you do not want to breathe the dust that comes off of the sawing and the grinding process. You want to wear a mask. Every time you grind or cut on quartz, you want to wear a mask, because if you breathe a lot of the dust, you can get something called silicosis, which will kill you. As a side note, don't even think about grinding on malachite, because it also is poisonous and could kill you. Okay, now I don't know if you can see this. Right in here in this part is something we call a veil. In this case, I believe it's a crack. So we're going to draw a line right there. Then there's another crack right there. And this crack here extends, I believe, all the way up there. And it looks like it keeps going up there and right through there. So we're going to make a cut right through here, and after that cut we may make another cut this way through the gem. We'll see later on about that. So what we're doing here, we're taking these larger gems and examining to see if we need to make any cuts. Here's one I've already marked We're going to take a cut right through the middle of that thing. And then possibly you see this other defect in here. We're going to have to do some more cleaning up in there. Anyway, this is a long process. You can see this end here all has to be taken off of this gem. And so after we do a video of this, here's another big one that we have to cut. Perhaps you can see the inclusions reflecting in there, the different cracks and defects that we have to take out of there. Even though it would be nice not to have to, there's no way around it. And then maybe you can see that little line of bubbles in there. That's called a veil. And that we need to saw right along that line also. So that we can, so even though this looks like a big stone, it's not going to be very big when we finish with it. And perhaps not even have two colors. But there's no way around it, we just have to saw. So what we're going to do now is put some water inside of here. It has to be grinding wet. And put on a mask and start sawing. Here we go. I'm wearing a mask, so anything I say will be very muffled. I have a leak. Well, we have a leak. I'll have to stop the video and see if I can fix it. I'm going to start up the grinding machine. You probably won't be able to see because of the water shield where the stone actually touches the grinding wheel. But this one is a coarse one, medium one, and a fine one. Mainly I'll be using the coarse and medium grinding stone. You may have seen me cut my thumb there on the saw. That is a common thing. It happens, you grind your fingernails on the grinder or cut your fingers a little bit on the saw. It hasn't killed me yet, so I'm keeping going. Also, we talked in the earlier part of this video about cobbing, about taking a piece of rough and chipping off the excess with a hammer. And this is a process that you need to wear gloves because these little points, these little chips that chip off the rock are sharp as a razor, and so you have to take more care than I've been taking here. Anyway, let's do some grinding. We're just trying to clean this material up here and put on my mask. We're not going to really try to preform it now, just clean it up. Just checking the water flow here. What I'm doing here, just taking my mask off a minute, is I'm trying to clean it up and also help us to see into it a little better so we can orient the color and know exactly what we have. You can probably hear that one side of this wheel here has had less use, and so it's rougher than the middle. There's a little bubble right there, but I'm going to leave it there for now because it's just under the surface and we can take that out in the faceting. Just taking my mask down a minute to tell you about quartz. Quartz is not hard as far as gemstones go, but it's really tough. I don't know if you've ever split firewood, but elm wood is very stringy and very hard to split because it just doesn't break open easily. And quartz is sort of the elm wood of the gems. On the Mohs scale, it's about a 7, 7.5, whereas the hardest stone, number 10, is a diamond. And so quartz is down there a little bit on the hardness, but it's got a toughness to it that I can't explain. So when you go to grind on it, you really have to push hard, and it takes a long time to grind a quartz compared to other materials. See those inclusions? I'm going to be trying to grind those out of there. I'm sort of taking what might be a natural face and smoothing it out. And then these points and thin places I'm just grinding off because they really can't be used later. So any points or really thin areas like this, I'll just grind off because it's too thin for any faceting. There's still a little something right in there I'm trying to get out. Now I see my little defect is not entirely out, but I might leave a little bit of it in there just to see where it might end up when we actually facet. This one here I need to get out. Well, I'm fighting with this one little veil in here, trying to get that out of there without losing too much material. It's going to have to go, so I'm going to take part of this off of here. This one needs to be sawed, so I'm going to go back over to the saw. All right, now you may remember that we have 700, or we had 791.1 grams. So with 791.1 grams in the beginning, then we ended up with, after we ground everything relatively clean, 410.5 grams. Okay, if we take our 410.5 and divide it by 791.1, we come with up with our percentage of yield up until this point. So we've essentially lost half of our parcel. We started with 791, we have 410, it's a little over half the parcel. So essentially we can say we lost 50%. All right, with this percentage in mind here, we're going to talk to John and find out what he thinks we're going to lose, how much more weight we're going to lose until we get to the final polished and cut gemstone. And so then we'll have an idea of our final yield from the whole parcel. This number here is just our yield grinding clean, and then we'll have a further loss when we cut and polish these gemstones. Okay, I've talked with John, and he's looked through the parcel that I cleaned up, and he seems to think that the yield is going to be pretty low. 25 to 30% yield at the most, which in total is going to put us pretty far down there, less than 20% yield on the whole parcel, I believe. Let me just take a moment and calculate that. Okay, I've tried to look at the yield here, and it looks like our overall yield is going to be about 12 to 13%. If you remember, I talked in the beginning of the video about the yield, average yield in the industry being 20%. Well, in this case, we're going to have less than that, partially because the material had a lot of defects, and the other is because we're going to have to orient this color in a direction that's pleasing. If you mix the colors while you're cutting, then you get kind of a muddy looking purpley brown look. But if you orient the two colors where you can see the separate colors in the stone in a pleasing way, in a nicely divided way, then you have a more valuable stone. So in our case, we ended up losing a lot more than we wanted to, but we are going to have some nice stones, and it's going to be a good product to sell. Let me just show you some of the stones we have here. I'll see if you can see this right here, where the color orientation is at a diagonal through the middle of the stone. So that's going to make probably a big oval, with half of it being a yellow tone and half of it being the purple. So that's going to be a real nice big stone, make a nice pendant for someone. Here's another one where you can see the color definition pretty clearly, but you can also see that this point here is sort of lost. It's going to have to be trimmed off and make a stone divided equally in the middle here to make a more pleasing stone. So you can see there's a lot of loss here. You're going to have a little light colored citrine in the end. It's not going to be very interesting. And then another stone just to show you how the colors are divided here. This one's more complicated. You can see there's a patch of yellow with a couple patches of purple, and so there's going to be more weight loss to have a clearly divided stone, which is pretty. So there you have it. We've ground, we've sawed, we worked on this rough a lot, and in the end there's going to be a lot of smaller stones. Some of them are going to have to be sawed right across the stone and oriented in the smaller direction to get a clearly divided stone. And so there are a lot of smaller pieces, but some big, nice, chunky pieces. But in the end, it's fun. We get some beautiful gems. People are going to like them and wear them for a very long time. It's interesting that these gemstones can be passed on even from one generation to another, so that you have many, many generations of people who will enjoy and appreciate a beautiful gem. So don't forget to visit our website, johndyergems.com, and pick a gem out for yourself. Something you really like, something that fits in your budget, something you'll wear, and your children will wear, and your grandchildren maybe even wear. And it's a good investment because it brings you pleasure to wear it, pleasure to look at it, pleasure for other people to enjoy, to see it and enjoy it also, and a long-lasting investment, which I'm not saying you're going to make money at this, but what I'm going to say is that the enjoyment of it will last your lifetime and perhaps even the lifetime of many others. So get to the website, pick out your gem, find a really good goldsmith who's a good craftsman who can design something you'll really like, and have yourself a gem made. And thank you for watching this video.